Good afternoon. My name is Elaine Hensley. Today I will present 4 contemporary topics for the consulting psychologist. These will include emotional intelligence from Chapter 16, entitled Proactive Ways to Improve Leadership Performance. The next is Losing Corporate Direction. This is from Chapter 19, entitled Consulting to For-Profit Organizations. The third topic is Task Force Education, which is from Chapter 23, and it's consulting with healthcare organizations. And finally, the last one is Performance versus Outcome Measures from Chapter 29, and it's called A Strategic Approach to Measuring Organizational Performance. So to begin, we will discuss emotional intelligence. Now, emotional intelligence is defined as the ability to understand information and to regulate emotions by focusing on the cognitive processes and not emotional reactions to what is happening in the situations. So the emotional intelligence can affect performance as well as interpersonal relationships. The literature review focuses on how we can develop emotional intelligence measurement tools and then train on emotional intelligence. So Palmer and Lee discussed that it is possible to learn to increase your emotional intelligence, and they devised a questionnaire or a development program to do just that. And the participants of that program did happen to increase their emotional intelligence scores by 43%. So there is something to that information. So from a biblical perspective, we want to remember that we want to focus our attention on Christ in all things, all day long, in everything we do. So we're looking to see past the surface level in bits and pieces of information to discern the truth and to discern what is good. And that's what we should focus on. And so this biblical verse from Philippians speaks of just that. For the consulting recommendations, again, Palmer and Lee devised an emotional intelligence assessment form and development programs with coaching groups, etc., to increase the level of emotional intelligence in the participants, and they got excellent results. And then I would just add on to that probably a follow-up and regular interval coaching as needed for those employees who aren't quite there, aren't quite progressing as they should, or as they need to. And that can also be on performance reviews. So the next topic is losing corporate direction. Losing corporate direction is related to kind of staying on the narrow path for the Christian. So God put us on a narrow path for us to follow, and we're supposed to follow that path all the way until death, when we meet him again, and he tells us, good and faithful servant, you may come in. And the corporate direction, losing corporate direction, is kind of related to that, where when you first launch a corporation, you have a mission statement and a vision statement, and the big picture of what you want to accomplish. And somewhere along the way, with certain events and situations that happen, new implementations of programs and rules and regulations, you get off track a little bit. And this is called strategic drift, as explored by Ahn, who determined unclear leadership creates this confusion, and poor decisions made along the way also creates this dilemma. So we have Herman that pointed out that corporate direction can be interpreted differently among executives. So corporate direction could be interpreted differently from HR to the CEO, and from the small departments to maybe one of the larger departments in the corporation. So each type of department can interpret the same thing in different ways. So we have to keep that in mind and maybe do an assessment to see if they're all on the same page, the way they interpret the material. Lehman discovered that the HR department, for example, was not aligned with the corporate direction. So we want to look at that. For a biblical approach in losing corporate direction, we have to remember the parable of the prodigal son. So when we lose our direction and we get lost, God finds a way to bring us back. And when he does call us back to himself, there's great rejoicing. The Bible says something about the angels rejoice in heaven every time a son is brought back home. So we want to remember the prodigal son. And in this scripture, for this my son was dead and he is alive again. He was lost and now is found. And they begin to be merry. They rejoiced because of that. So as corporations lose their direction and we help to put them back on path, there needs to be a celebration, a rejoicing. For the consulting part of this, we want to conduct communication audits just to see, like I said before, if everybody is on the same page as far as interpreting the same pieces of information. So we have to determine how that information is rolled out across platforms and how it is communicated. Another thing is we should evaluate the teams and make decisions that line up with organizational goals. And then we can offer change and restructuring as needed, and then do audits from time to time to ensure that everybody is still on the same page. So those things are very important. And that was for for-profit organizations. Now we'll go to the healthcare organizations, where training in a healthcare organization can be quite challenging because of patient scheduling. So you can't stop seeing patients just because you have a training session or you're implementing a new software application program. The patients still need to be seen at a reasonable time. So how do you do that when you have a limited amount of space and limited amount of staff? And oftentimes in healthcare organizations, they're short-staffed because people come and go and they want to work for different companies and they're going back to school and different things. So there is a lot of turnover in healthcare organizations. So the literature showed that the consulting engagements often failed because they were focused on long-term performance and the same people weren't around. And then also there should be a standardized in-person and online training. So you have to offer these people some options. There can be small groups. I would suggest small groups for the in-person, and those who can't make the in-person can do it online. Corcoran revealed that many training programs are overly technical and lead to fragmented care, burnout, and organizational insufficiency. So we have to make sure that these training programs are also understandable and everybody in the room can understand what they're talking about, because oftentimes you have administrative staff and specialty doctors and surgeons in the same room when it comes to corporate training. A biblical approach in this shall be that in Exodus, God himself told Moses, "You shall teach them the statutes and laws that I give you in a way that they understand, and they must walk in those ways." So we have a commandment from God to do the same thing, to make sure that people know what's expected of them in a clear and direct way, and that we make sure that they're complying. And with consulting recommendations, again, I'd organize leadership behavior and organizational culture with training. I would do small groups, both in person and online. Facilitate meetings to help clarify the priorities. So the initial setup of this task force would be to facilitate meetings to help clarify what we're going to do, how we're going to do it, and how we're going to get this to all departments in as um, expeditiously way. So the next thing would be creating objectives and content for training, and then implementing the training program itself. Then you'd offer follow-up trainings for people who had questions. You'd be available for questions and concerns and issues and problems they might have. And then ongoing coaching, maybe once or twice a year. That could be online to just refresh their memory on different nuances of the application or the training material as needed. And the fourth presentation would be on performance versus outcome measures. So there are many circumstances where you think you're just kind of chugging along there and you think you're doing a good job. And then when somebody runs your statistics, the statistics don't match up with what you think you're doing. So the performance outcomes are lower than what you perceive to be doing. So we have to address this. All three articles in this study that I pulled identify inconsistencies measuring performance outcomes. So Desat and Awang confirmed 10 instruments for measuring organizational performance, and these included employee and customer retention and service. So we're talking about both the employee and the customer, and not just the employees in this, we're talking about a customer service in this kind of situation. And then employee performance as well. And another study created a new performance model. And what they're trying to do in this is show that there are human constructs that are very valuable in an organization that are used every day to meet performance outcomes. And their personalities and their behaviors and its drive and its characteristics of the employees themselves. It's the determination for them to be successful. And those are just as important as the skills and abilities and talents they bring to the corporate level job itself. So a lot of these studies were designed to blend in those two aspects, the humanistic side as well as the job performance side, to create one comprehensive model for measuring performance outcomes. So I thought that was very interesting. And without that humanistic aspect to the measurement, one study found that it was just incomplete. It was just not showing the right statistics. The biblical approach to this is the parable of the talents. So when we're talking about measuring performance outcome, there's a parable that said a master gave, one guy 1 talent, one guy 5 talents, and one guy 10 talents. This may be wrong. I didn't actually read it, but I remember it. And I'm not reading it now, so just forgive me. But the guy who had 1 talent made another talent, so he doubled his money, right? And then the guy who had 5 talents added some more talents. But the guy who had, I did it backwards. But the guy who had 1 talent buried his in the ground so nobody would steal it. And his master called him a fool because he didn't steward that money properly. He said you should have put it in the bank where at least it could make an interest instead of doing nothing with it. So he gave his talent away to the guy who doubled his money. So the point of that story is to be good stewards of the talents we have and to invest in them in a way that's going to promote growth. And we can do that if we focus on again, the humanistic side as well as the job performance side of a situation to measure the whole person and not just a portion of the person, not just their job performance, but the person as a whole. So I thought that was a pretty good analogy, even though I messed it up. You can read it there, and you can look it up. It's Matthew 25, verses 16 through 29. So I would encourage you not to trust anything Elaine says, but be as the Bereans who search the scriptures daily to prove if what I'm saying is actually true or not. Anyway, the consulting recommendations are introducing a balanced scorecard to measure performance outcomes. Measurements should incorporate the psychometric as well as the performance metric, and interventions and coaching can be utilized for underperformers, and like we discussed in the emotional intelligence slides, a lot of that can be taught. The humanistic side, a lot of that can be taught. So that was all I had for you today. I hope you enjoyed it. And I thought, if nothing else, maybe it was a little entertaining. And these are the references that I used. I did use quite a few, and maybe one or two extra in here that I used just for because I thought they were interesting and I thought they added to the conversation. And these are here for your perusal. I hope you enjoyed it and have a wonderful day.